What's up, guys? It's your man, Donovan Sharp, and welcome to this edition of TSR Live. Let's go ahead and get right to it. My special guest is none other than Troy Francis. He is the senior game writer over at Return of Kings. He can be followed on Twitter at Troy7Laws. That's at TROY, the number 7 and Laws. His signature piece, 7 Laws of Seduction, can also be found on his website, realtroyfrancis.com. I have linked his Return of Kings column profile, as well as his website and his book, The 7 Laws of Seduction, in the description. Troy, welcome, and thanks for coming on with us today.
Thank you very much. Great to be on the show, Donovan. How's things?
Things are great, man. I got a few things in the works here. I might be making a trip here to Europe here pretty soon, so we'll see how that works out. Oh yeah. Nothing's engraved in stone yet. I have to make sure that I've got a few I's dotted and a few T's crossed. But by and large, things are going real well. I'm making some changes in the show, and it looks as though things are going well. How about you, man? What you been up to?
Well, just sort of churning the material out, man. Really, I'm doing this series of books at the moment called 50 Shades of Game, which is about the kinkier, sort of naughtier side of game. So the first one is about the kind of BDSM fetish scene. The second one, which I'm just working on now, is about swingers clubs, so that's going to be out quite soon.
Good.
And the third one is going to be about strip clubs and strip club games, so that's going to be like the trilogy.
Oh wow!
Yes, on the slightly more underground side of game that I think a lot of game writers don't really touch on so much. So I wanted to sort of put everything that I know about that out there in those books.
Yeah, listen, absolutely. And when those books drop, man, listen, I'll have you on, and we'll promote the hell out of it, man, and get you a nice big audience, man. 50 Shades of Game, that's already got my interest, man. Like, because 50 Shades of Grey, like all the bitches, are like, oh my god, 50 Shades of Grey, Kristen Grey, blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was kind of, I like the title, but so the first one's out already. So the first one is kind of about, sort of BDSM type, fetish type, that kind of whole scene. Because what struck me with that is there's some kind of interesting crossovers between game and that kind of stuff. Because in that scene, guys are talking about, the majority of girls in that scene are submissive. I mean, there are some dominant girls, but by and large, the girls tend to be submissive and the guys tend to be dominant because the girls get turned on by dominant guys. Right. So what really interested me, and of course you see that reflected in 50 Shades of Grey itself with Christian Grey. So what really interested me is what lessons can we learn from that? Is there anything we can take from that we can put into more, regular style game, really?
Good.
So it's interesting. It's interesting stuff. And the next one's on swingers, which is kind of an interesting scene as well.
Good. I'm certainly looking forward, dude. I'm gonna have to check that out. Looks like I've got a little bit of a delay between the video and my audio. Looks like I'm lip syncing, but whatever. As long as my lips are moving and I'm talking, I don't think we're gonna have a problem with it. Shout out to Rob Cruz with the $2 super chat. Says on my reserve drill weekend duty, still support and appreciate that. Shout out to Mr. Granger with the $5 super chat. Let's go ahead and get right into this, Troy. The reason I wanted to have you on today is, and I'm sure that you probably get a lot of correspondence from a lot of men who probably reach out and say, hey, Troy, you're the man. I've listened to your works. I've done what you've said to do. Everything, I'm slaying girls left and right, but I'm 37, or in my case, I'm 40. I'm about to be 41.
Yeah.
Slaying girls is great, but it's kind of getting old. I'm looking for a little more of a connection. I'm looking to pick a girl to be my long-term partner. So today, Troy, I'd like to discuss with you what things, from a red pill point of view, what things in your mind are necessary to make a girl, I guess, eligible to be the main chick, or, in a long-term relationship, possibly even, dare I say, marriage, because your good friend Paul Janka got married a couple years back.
Absolutely.
And Paul Janka, dude, he's out there with Mystery RSD. Like he is a top level game master. So obviously there's something about his wife that drew him to her in a sense that he didn't mind marrying her. Like he wanted to marry her, he wanted to consolidate on her. So in your mind, give me some thoughts on what's required other than the obvious things like being attractive, cooking, cleaning, etc. Yeah. What personality traits does a girl have to be at least in the running to be in a long-term relationship with Troy Francis?
Well, I think fundamentally they've got to be somebody who's going to support your mission, basically, because as we know, I mean, people have read the David Data book, The Way of the Superior Man, and this gets talked a lot about on red pill sites and game sites. But fundamentally, the guy's got to have a bigger mission in life than than his wife or his partner. So it doesn't really matter what that is. It might be writing, it might be politics, it might be building a business, it might be it might be a sport, it might be any number of different things. But whatever that mission is, I think that the woman that he lets into his life on a long-term, intimate basis has to be somebody who understands that and who's going to support that. At least for me, that's the most important thing. And one of the reasons that I was in a relationship with somebody just over a year ago now, which kind of came to an end. And one of the reasons that came to an end was I just felt like this woman just isn't going to support me in doing what I want to actually do in my life. So for me, that's got to be the number one thing.
Absolutely. I agree. I think before, and it's funny because girls think the world revolves around them. And feminism in the culture teaches girls that a man must acquiesce to you. Woman, you are the prize to be won. The only reason why we even put up with girls, two main reasons we put up with girls is listen, man, I mean, as much as it's as great as it is to fuck different sluts every night of the week, men, we're designed to want to connect with a woman outside of sex. Sex is important, but the number two reason that we put up with women is because they have vaginas. Listen, man, I mean, we can talk about the sex dolls and fleshlights all we want to, but nothing feels like a living, breathing vagina.
Well, absolutely, indeed, breathing.
Yes, right.
Absolutely. I mean, look, there's this conflict I think all of us have, all men have to some degree or another, between, we want variety, we want sex, obviously, we're not necessarily designed to be monogamous. So we see a wide range of women we're attracted to, we want to have sex and everything else. But then at some point as well, all of us, I think to varying degrees, but I think all of us really want some level of affection as well. We want some level of affection, support, and that's where the conflict comes. And then, at some point, especially as we get, older into our late 30s and 40s, we start to think, well, okay, is now the time to settle down? And then these questions start to arise. Who is the woman that I'm going to settle down with, if indeed there is one?
So aside from supporting your mission as a man, what are some other traits that you feel? You know what? Let's actually just kind of do this like an interview, because I'll give you my three and then you can give me your three.
Okay.
The three traits that I like that my women absolutely have to have for me to consider them, and these are the top three. Number one, and I've discussed this with Illimitable Man before. Number one, she has to be an introvert. I'm not interested in a woman who has got to be everywhere, be the life of the party, and be in everyone's business. That's the number one trait. If you're an extrovert, I'll fuck you and I'll chuck you, but I'm not looking at you. I'm not looking at you for a long-term relationship. The second thing is that she has to have a healthy respect for men. And when I say a healthy respect for men, this means you know and understand and abide by traditional gender and sex roles. You understand, listen, you can't be with a woman who does not fundamentally understand that the man leads and the woman follows. If a woman doesn't buy into that by the time I get to her, I'm not about, dude, it would take years of training. It would take years of training to be able to get that through a woman's head. Now, of course, if you're the right man in the right place at the right time and you have the right game, well, then yeah, she'll say, you know what? I used to think like a feminist, but fucking with guys like Donovan or Troy, those guys have showed me that, yeah, you know what? I kind of do like being, in the submissive. I do like following. And of course, the third trait that a woman has to have in order to be in the running for a long-term relationship with me is she has to be trainable, right? So, okay, so she's an introvert and she buys into traditional sex roles, but if I can't teach you how to be the best woman you can be for me, then there's nothing I can do. I'm not. Don't get me wrong. You have to be in position to train women. You have to work with her, right? Especially women today. Even if you got like the mythical unicorn virginal woman, guess what? You still have to train her. So those are the three most important traits that Donovan Sharp thinks are important to make a girl put her in the running to be the proverbial main chick. What say you?
I mean, there's some interesting points there. I like what Illimitable Male you know, the first point that you referred to, the Illimitable Man, sort of backs up as well. I mean, I think the introvert thing is really interesting, and I might even want to nick that for myself, actually, because I do sort of agree with that. Because I'm a pretty introverted kind of a guy, and you know, aside from all the game stuff and everything else, and obviously I've taught myself kind of you know, more extrovert tendencies, but fundamentally I'm kind of introverted, and I like to just have a fairly quiet sort of life. And what I can't have is some crazy chick who is going out partying the whole time, and you know,
hell no,
you know, all of that. So I would go along with that. I think how can I put this really? I think a lot of it comes down to temperament. I think a sweetness of temperament is really important, and I suppose another way of saying that is a more traditionally feminine, kind of temperament is a way to sort of encapsulate that. So, you know, what I'm not looking for any kind of a long-term relationship would be somebody who is really domineering, who tries to be masculine, who tries to take that masculine role. You know, I'm looking for somebody who's, and I'm not talking here about necessarily like kind of subservience or something like this. I don't want this to come over too much in that way, but at the same time, you know, relationships are difficult enough without having somebody busting your balls the whole time, you know, and it's just not pleasant, and it's not something I find attractive either. So I think sweetness of disposition, as I say, support in terms of you know, the mission, which again is another way of saying, I mean, and the other thing is, I think, is a willingness to grow. So as you were talking about you know, trainability. I mean, I think for me, it's sort of like, for me, there's no value in getting into a relationship if we're both just then going to stagnate and sit there and watch TV until we die. You know, it's got to be about, okay, I want to improve. I'm trying to improve my life constantly through the various things that I do. And I'm really interested in self-development, and I'm really interested in, you know, how can I live a better life as a man, you know, and as a person on this planet. And if the woman doesn't buy into that and she's not interested in a similar thing herself, then it's going to hold me back. So I think that's really, really key as well.
Good. Okay. So let's go through the scenario, right? So we have the girl that we think is going to be our main chick. We put her through the training. Now we are in a long-term relationship with her. Yeah. And again, like I said at the top of the show, a lot of guys, yes, they want to be able to learn how to slay sluts and all this other kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, men are also designed to desire a relationship of companionship with a female. This is how we're designed. No, we're not designed to be monogamous, but that doesn't mean that we don't still want a wife or kids or to have a long-term girlfriend. Yeah. How would one conduct himself in a long-term relationship? Because again, there are many game doctrines out there: frame, game, abundance mentality. All of these things keep a woman in line, give her the impression that you might have one foot out the door. I can't imagine that these same rules apply in a long-term relationship, do they? Or do they?
Well, I think to some extent they do. I mean, I think in the sense that, and this is where it gets difficult for the person in the long-term relationship, because the difficulty really is the domestication that starts to happen, particularly when you start to live together. And there's a really good book on this, which is the title of which I'll remember in a moment. But basically, there is this kind of betaization process that can happen, particularly when you're cohabitating with a woman, whereby, you know, slowly, bit by bit, she starts to sort of chip away at you, and you start to concede more and more, until, you know, you imagine at the beginning you were the kind of the alpha dude. She, you know, you had the swagger. She, you know, she was blown away by, you know, the way you put yourself across. And then 2 years later, you're kind of I don't know, you're kind of sitting up in bed wearing your socks, reading the newspaper or something, and, you know, she's not allowed you to go out with your friends on the Saturday night or whatever. You've shifted in terms of the way that you know, the original sort of alpha thing that probably lit her fire at the beginning has now been extinguished, and that's a problem.
Well, I was going to say that it would seem theoretically that's the natural state of things, right? Once you are in a long-term relationship or in a relationship of consequence, marriage, etc., you almost allow yourself to be civilized, so to speak, right? You're not out talking to girls, you're not into partying because you have the girl that you want. You're in a long-term relationship, and the girl should love me for me and this and that and the other. How do you maintain your red pill edge? within the context of a long-term relationship?
Well, I think the first thing is to be, I think forewarned is forearmed for a start. So I think the first thing to do is to be aware of this as an issue, and because most guys are. I mean, let's face it, most guys, you know, who aren't into, you know, who haven't discovered the red pill, or they're not interested, they haven't discovered the manosphere or anything. They're probably not even aware of this. So most guys think, okay, I'll get married, I'll start living with this girl, I've got my girl now, everything's sorted, I can just let everything go. You know, I can stop going to the gym, I can stop working out, I can stop, you know, I can lose all of my edge because I'm over the finish line, I've got the girl. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out like that, because what you can do then is make her lose attraction for you. And you know, fundamentally, I think attraction is so important, because if you lose attraction, then she loses respect for you, and it's not so long after that that she can then think, well, maybe there's another guy in the neighborhood who's you know, who's going to be a better, you know, bearer of or provider of, you know, genes for my offspring, and she's going to go off and fuck someone else or whatever. So you've got to be really, really careful. Having said that, you know, as well, you can't overstate this too much. I mean, some red pill guys take a very hardline view of that, and they think this is always going to happen under all circumstances, and it's not quite like that either. But you have to be aware fundamentally first that this kind of dynamic is going on, and then you have to think, okay, so how can I maintain my edge whilst in the relationship? So it comes down to some very simple things, the kind of stuff you'd be doing when you were single, really. For a start, keeping in shape, looking good, being well groomed. Whether you then go down the sort of dread route, as it's called, where you sort of almost make her worried that you're gonna,
there we go,
you know, keeping a foot out the door the whole time. I mean, I think that is debatable. I mean, it depends. You know, if you've been married to somebody for, you know, for a long time, then it's kind of going to be hard to probably to do that, and you may not want to do that. But I think what's important, you referred to Paul Janker, and I think of him and other friends that I've got who are married, and these are, they're probably not playing dread games like that. They're not sort of making it look as if they might go off and shag somebody else all the time, but they kind of don't need to, because they are inherently high value guys. So the wife of that man is going to know intuitively that this guy has still got it. This guy will still get other female attention. He could, you know, go off and start a family with somebody else if he wanted to. But he chooses not to, because he wants to be with her. And that's where you want to be, really. You want to be showing enough value that, you know, she knows that you could have options, but you choose not to exercise them because you're you know, you've got ethics, and that's not what you're going to do.
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point, and you actually answered the question. You answered the second question with the first response. And so the question is how do we maintain the red pill edge? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to be aware, stay in shape, you know, make sure you're well groomed, make sure you're still confident, make sure you're still commingling with people, make sure that you're doing what needs to be done. If you do this, your woman is going to know that you are a high value guy. And guess what? Other women are going to know as well. And so you can almost, and listen, I think a lot of times you can almost indirectly cause dread game just by not letting yourself go. Because when you're out with your female, your woman knows that she's not the only woman that is attracted to you. Yes. And one of the standard game tenets is that women don't want a man that other women don't want. So the minute she starts to see the attention from other females dwindling, she'll start to lose attraction for you, because women are hive-minded creatures. In her mind, okay, I think he's attractive, but if other women don't think he's attractive, is my is my definition of attractiveness, is it flawed? Is there something wrong with me?
Yes.
If a woman's with an attractive guy, if she thinks he's attractive, that's only half the battle. She has to get sort of an indirect co-signature from other females, whether she knows them or not, that the guy she is with is attractive. And when she gets those co-signatures, it works two ways. Number one, it verifies that she is attracted to attractive men. And number two, that's indirect dread game. Well, I better keep my shit together, or he can and will go off and fuck these broads if I don't keep my shit together. Yes,
absolutely. That's absolutely right. And the challenge really for people in long relationships is keeping that going long term, because at the beginning it's at the beginning, if you've played the game right, then you're going to get that naturally. So, for example, I've been dating this girl recently, this Serbian girl, who's a very attractive girl, and she said the other day, she said to me, "Oh, I bet you've never been rejected, have you?" And I'm like, fucking crazy. I'm like,
no, actually, I have not. That's what you're
I've been rejected more times than probably most guys in the fucking United Kingdom. Do you know what I mean? Because I've hit on so many chicks and been blown out so many times.
Sure, sure.
But and I'm not saying that's a grand, you know, make myself look good or anything. But in her eyes, she obviously likes me for whatever reason, and
sure.
she's got that mindset that, oh, you know, Troy's a really high value guy. Having said that, I've only been seeing her for a month or so. So imagine that over 10 years, because over 10 years you've got to keep up. And we're not living together or anything like that. Obviously, it's just, you know, a fairly casual thing. So it's relatively easy for me at this stage to maintain, you know, that aura of, you know, I'm a player and I'm a desirable guy. If she moves in with me and we're living together for 10 years and she sees me putting the rubbish out on a Saturday night and, you know, everything else, is that going to stick? And that's the real challenge that guys have got, is balancing that domesticity and the sort of, you know, normalization of life with keeping that spark there. But you know, it can be done. It can be done. And it's by being inherently high value.
I agree. And it's funny, like when we think about our superheroes like Batman, I don't know, Iron Man, Superman, well, not really Superman. Superman is a beta male. James Bond. What all of these male superheroes have in common, guys like John Wayne, what they all have in common is that they are not tamed individuals. James Dean, a rebel without a cause. Part of what makes them attractive is that they are not civilized. No one has been able to tie them down, which makes them all the more attractive. And to be able to maintain that within the context of a long-term relationship, it takes work. You have to be proactive at it. And again, just like you said, it starts with being aware of the fact that, okay, I'm in a long-term relationship now, but if I let myself slip, I'm not going to be as attractive to this girl as I once was. So you still have to have this aura of being this alpha guy, but by the same token, it's almost like sometimes you don't want to dial back your player power level, but at the same token, she needs to be reminded that you are the person that she fell in love with. Because again, the minute she thinks that you're no longer that guy, that's when the shit tests come. And if you fail those shit tests, then the shit tests become more complex, and then there are unpassable shit tests, et cetera, et cetera. Shout out to D3Land 011. He says, what with the $9.99 super chat. He says, what Troy said about the introvert thing hit the nail on the head for me. I'm introverted, and all I cared about was taking care of responsibilities, and all she did was nag me and party with her friends.
Yeah, nightmare. I mean, I've been in some terrible situations in the past. I don't allow it anymore, but I have been in some bad situations in the past where I've had girlfriends who were just party animals and they want to be out all night and, you know, and all this kind of thing. And it doesn't work for me. It's not good for me psychologically. And, you know, it's just no good. So I'm very strict on that these days in terms of who I let into my life if it's going to be on a longer term basis. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to be avoided. And actually what he says is interesting because it kind of links in. I mean, another problem that I've had with being in relationships with some girls is that either they want to party the whole time or they kind of don't want to do anything the whole time, you know, or they're sort of laying on the couch until 12, you know, till 1, 2 in the afternoon, you know, they're still in bed or they're watching Netflix and stuff. And I mean, when you're somebody who's quite driven and you've got stuff to do and you want to, you know, you're building a business and all this kind of thing, it's really hard when you've got somebody who's like that and you're attached to the hip with her, you know.
Kevin Ibanez asks, can men be high value without being successful in the financial arena? So in other words, could you be a high value guy and not really make a lot of money?
Well, it's a really interesting one, this. I was talking to Tom Torero about, I don't know if people are aware of the English day gamer Tom Torero. He's on YouTube and stuff. He said, Anyway, I've been chatting to him a bit about this recently. I was on his podcast the other week, and I mean, you can certainly get girls if you're not high value in the sense of having a lot of money and all of that kind of shit, you know. But because his whole thing, and I think this is a kind of a pretty stereotypical sort of red pill kind of idea, is that you should be the provider. Sorry, you should be the lover, not the provider.
Right.
So,
Alpha fucks, beta bucks.
Exactly. So he rocks up in a scruffy shirt, pair of ripped jeans, you know, old t-shirt, you know, all the rest of it, and fucks these hot girls who are then, you know, probably also hooking up with rich guys who are giving them, you know, giving them money and stuff. But he's not. So you can certainly do that. Whether that translates into a longer term relationship, though, is a slightly different thing, I think.
I agree. Let's move to another part of long-term relationships, shit tests, right?
Yeah.
Later on, I'm going to be doing a Donovan's Den on how to thwart a woman's sexual manipulation of said man, and I've got some really good tips in there that I'm gonna drop a little bit later on. It's been a busy day for me today, to be sure, but what are your thoughts on handling shit tests as a married man or a man in a long-term relationship or a man who is cohabitating with another woman? Because, I mean, listen, if you're dating a girl, right, and you try to fuck her at her place and she's like, I'm not in the mood. Guess what? You can just pick up and bounce the fuck up out of there. You can't do that if you're a married man. You can't do that if you're cohabitating. So how do you handle shit tests that come your way from your wife or long-term girlfriend in a way that says to her, listen, I'm attracted, like I could leave, but I'm not going to. And it's a slippery slope, but how would you handle something like that?
When you say, are you talking about her not wanting to have sex, basically?
Well, I mean, not wanting to have sex, challenging your authority, things of that nature. Listen, we know all about how to handle shit tests in relationships, because especially if you're not living with her, if you're not legally obligated to wake up with her every morning, i.e. marriage, dude, you can just bounce out of there anytime you want to, right? Dude, fuck this. You're acting like a bitch. I'm out. How would you handle shit tests from a wife? Like if she says, she asks you, well, how do I look in this dress? How do I look in these jeans? Oh, I'm not in the mood. I'm not going to have sex tonight. How would you handle that in a red pill relationship?
I think one thing that's probably most effective is the mini freeze out. So you would, I mean, and it depends, because look, I mean, if she's got a headache one night or something, I mean, I'm not going to be there's got to be some give and take within the relationship, because clearly if you're serious in this thing and you're together and you're living together, then the likelihood is you're not going to be having crazy sex every night of the week, because people have got work and they're tired and all this kind of stuff. Having said that, if it's clearly an issue, or if it becomes clear that you're being sort of manipulated in some way, then I think the sort of mini freeze out idea can be very effective. And what I mean by that is taking a step back, disassociating as much as you can for a period of time. And how long it is going to depend on the severity of the, what you feel that she's done. But it could be for a few hours, it could be for a day, it could be for a couple of days. And the way that you can do it is by and it's a very subtle thing, because obviously if you're living in the same house, you can't, I'm not saying necessarily that you go out and stay in a hotel or something, but and there's probably going to have to be a minimum degree of contact, because the phone might ring and she might say, oh, can you go and answer that or something. There's going to be little things where you can't avoid some contact. But what you can do is, aside from the essential, you can disassociate yourself. You can pull away. You can pull away psychologically and emotionally for a period of time, and she's going to feel that. And human nature being what it is, at some point she's going to come to you and she's going to try to bring you back in. So that would be my go-to. That would be my go-to method, I think, within a cohabitating relationship.
Yeah, honestly, truthfully, I think that's the only method. And I'm a little more totalitarian, right? So if my girl says she has a headache, and I have said and done this many times before, just to make sure that we're on the same page, I make a move. Oh, I don't really want to. I have a headache. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to go get you some listen, bend over and I'll get you 2 Advil when we're done. Like, to me, and it's funny because guys, and again, you think to yourself, God damn, Donovan, but that's just it, man. Like, yeah. I don't tolerate the typical, I have a headache. You know what? I got a headache too. That doesn't mean I don't want to get my dick sucked. As a matter of fact, a blowjob might actually go a long way in ridding me of said headache, right? And people might say, well, Donovan, you're selfish, this and that and the other. Hey, you know what? maybe I am, but girls get whatever they want all the time. If you're going to be in a relationship with me, you are there for my needs. And getting fucked while you have a headache is not the end of the world, sweetheart. Trust me, there are much worse things. So in my book, to me, there's really no margin. There's really no margin. If I want to fuck, I'm gonna fuck. And if you don't want to, that's when I listen. If you listen, I'm not gonna rape you, but hey, at that point, I'm just gonna have to do a freeze out in that regard. Let me ask your thoughts on a particular subject with regards to marriage. Now, again, neither you or I are married. Neither of us has kids. But you know, a lot of guys in our audience, they have kids. They're married. They have kids. How do you become a red pill? How do you run red pill game with kids? Right? Because let's say that you freeze out your wife because she hasn't given you the pussy in 3 days. Well, guess what? Women these days, a lot of them, especially when they think they're playing the game, they freeze you out too. So now you've got two people who haven't talked to each other. Well, I mean, who's the one who's going to up the ante? If that goes on long enough, eventually it's going to end in divorce. She's going to get the kids. How would you, hypothetically speaking, how would you handle a counter freeze out from a woman? Because listen, if you freeze her out, she's going to shit test you and freeze you out too. How would you handle that? Or would you just say, hey, look, man, like this is a stalemate. Whoever blinks first is the one who loses.
I think probably along those lines, yeah. But
okay.
But I think the thing with kids is, and again, you know, I'm not speaking from a position of experience because I don't have kids myself. But I think with that, as long as you need to be showing the kids themselves, you know, the love, as it were. So regardless of the freeze out or whatever's happening between you and your wife, you need to be showing that you're there for the kids and you need to be showing affection to them. And I mean, that's a difficult one because obviously you know, you could say, well, they're gonna pick up on this, they're gonna be harmed by this and all that kind of thing. And I mean, maybe that's the case, but that shouldn't prevent you from not putting up with what you regard as unacceptable behavior within your marriage. Because, I mean, you know, a lot of us have childhoods where not everything's perfect and, you know, that may have certain effects. I mean, certainly my childhood wasn't perfect. My parents divorced. I saw a lot of crap going on between them. You know, you've got to, when you're a parent and you're a husband as well, you're playing a very difficult sort of, there's a tightrope there. But nevertheless, just because you've got kids, it doesn't mean that you should put up with behavior that is unacceptable.
No, I would agree. And speaking of kids, as we've got about 10 minutes left in the show. Yeah. Speaking of kids, I get a lot of emails from guys who ask me, hey, I've got a son or I've got a daughter. Right. And listen, it's never easy to teach your kid red pill truth. It's never easy to teach your son red pill truth, but he's going to take to it a lot more quickly than the daughter. But the daughter, that's the big one, right? Yeah. So if Troy Francis has a boy and a girl, and he wants them to be the highest value males and females, again, within the context of a long-term relationship or a marriage, how do you raise the son? How do you raise the daughter? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think with the daughter, you have to be pretty honest about the realities of you know, a woman's life. And I think you've got to, because, you know, there's clearly an issue here. And I think Jordan Peterson talks about this and other people that, and I mean, this is well known. I mean, there is an issue here in terms of the body, the baby body clock is a real thing, right? So,
yes.
You know, and I think you've just got to make that abundantly clear. I mean, it's not that you can't have a career, it's not that you can't do this or that, but you've got to realise that the time is limited here. You know, you have a limited amount of time between about 18 and I don't know, whatever it is, early 30s or whenever, in order to, you know, to find a guy that you're gonna that's a decent guy that you're gonna want to be with and you can raise a kid with if that's what you want to do. And that time's not going to come back. So you can't be the CEO of, you know, some startup in Silicon Valley until you're 35 and then think, shit, what am I going to do now? And I think you have to make that very clear to the daughter. And I think with the son, I mean, maybe with the son, it's a bit more straightforward for us in a sense because we're guys already and we kind of know what they will need to know. And actually, a lot of the stuff that we call red pill truth now was, of course, pretty standard kind of stuff from our grandparents, in our grandparents' day and everything. So you do get examples of guys who've been told sort of red pill type things by their fathers or their grandfathers, just in the natural way of conversation. So because we've probably studied it a bit more, we need to just pass that knowledge on to our sons. Obviously just eking it out bit by bit. I think with kids like anybody else, really, it's about being honest at the end of the day. It's about saying, look, and not freaking them out when they're too young, but
right.
Saying, look, this is the reality of the world as I see it. It's not all pretty. It's not all wonderful, but you can have a positive life. You can build your life in a positive direction, but these are the things you need to watch out for, and just give them the realities rather than the sugar-coated kind of, fantasies that people give. I think that
as far as I'm concerned, if I had a son or a daughter, I would probably lead by example for the daughter, right? And a lot of people would think, okay, well, you do that for the son too, and that's obvious. But with the daughter, there's only so much you can tell a little girl. And listen, you're her parent, right? And of course, mom influences her too, which goes back to when you're selecting a girl, make sure that if you guys are talking about kids, make sure that you and her are on the same page. Because if you're not, that's going to cause deal breaker type trouble down the road. You do not want to be diametrically opposed in terms of your fundamental belief system before you have kids or after you have kids. You need to make sure that your woman, your wife, etc., is 100% on board with what you were talking about. If she is not, then guess what? No matter how much you like her, dude, she's got to go. Unless you guys decide never to have kids, you guys have to be on the same page as far as raising your kid.
Yeah.
So as far as the daughter is concerned, tell your wife, listen, you need to lead by example. Lead by example. You can talk to her, right? But I think girls pick up more on the actions of others, right? Girls are much more risk averse. So if you warn a little girl, hey, don't do this, she's more likely to listen to that advice. And then if she sees it reinforced with the mother, hey, I shouldn't dress like this or I shouldn't act like that, then that's more likely to sort of permeate her brain. And then of course, hopefully she doesn't lose her virginity before she gets married. That's the ideal situation. As far as sons are concerned, you got to sit down. You got to have a talk with your kid, because again, little girls are being told a lot of different things, and mom can certainly influence and say, hey, look, what they're telling you at school is wrong. What you see on TV to me, that's all wrong. And of course, if you're a good example as a mother, she should follow your lead. As a little boy, boys are emasculated as soon as they come out of the womb. In school, they're all drugged up. I mean, we know the whole story, right? Boys are taught that they're inherently inferior to girls. And this is why I think that dads have to take a direct approach and say, hey, look, DJ Donovan Jr., this is not how it is. I guess without getting too far into the red pill weeds, let him know, listen, the little girls that you see, like, not all of them are as nice and as sweet as you think. And you might think that daddy is an asshole for telling you this, but I'm here to tell you, I had to fuck 216 different broads before I found your mom, because girls are not made of sugar, spice, and everything nice. I think that to raise your son, you have to constantly be in his ear about red pill truth, because God knows as soon as he walks out the door, he's getting it from the other end. So it's almost like a contest between who has more influence on him, and whoever has more influence on him is the one who's in his ear the most. Because, I mean, again, the world is not going to let up, so you can't either. So my last question to you before we end this is how young is too young to teach sons about the red pill? If Troy Francis has a son named TJ, Troy Francis Jr., right? Or Troy Francis the third or whatever, at what age are you going to sit little TJ down and say, okay, Troy, let's have a talk. Here's how it really is in today's dating world.
God, it's an interesting one. I mean, probably. I mean, I'm thinking like 10. I'm thinking 10, 11, 12, maybe. I know there's a big gap between those ages. I'm just trying to think, really. I think you can start dripping things in probably from quite a young age. Even younger than that. Maybe when you sit down and have a big conversation. I don't know, 12ish, 13, maybe. Okay. I don't know what you think. Does that sound reasonable?
I think when they start showing interest in girls, and they make it very obvious, right? And shout out to Miami J with a couple of $2 super chats, says thank you both for working on the weekend, and he also thanks us for addressing parenting. Listen, parenting is certainly, and I mean, I'm not the world's foremost expert on parenting. I don't have any kids, and that's why I'm going to have other guests. But again, I think your approach is I think that approach is good, because it's almost like you have to do trickle truth, right? Yeah. You say things here and there, but as soon as he starts to express interest in when he starts to express interest in girls, this is when you really need to sit him down and say, okay, look, I know some changes are going on. ETF42 shout out says before puberty or right around the time puberty. That's when I think you should really sit down and break it down. Instead of having the conversation about the birds and the bees, we need to have a conversation about alpha fucks, beta bucks, as far as red pill dads are concerned.
I mean, I could have really done with this stuff when I was a kid, to be honest.
Oh, are you kidding me? Oh my God, dude.
Because there is this kind of dissonance between, on the one hand, you're watching these movies and you're seeing girls portrayed as these sort of angelic kind of creatures and everything else. But then in the real world, I don't know. I mean, the real world reflected it very differently to me, and for years there was this weird cultural, like, cognitive dissonance between what I was told things were meant to be like and how things actually were. And it wasn't really until years later, you know, for us that you know, largely through the internet and everything, really, that I find out that other people have had a similar experience. And obviously, it's going to be different for newer generations because you know, because of the internet, because of social media, it's meant that ideas can spread perhaps in a way that they couldn't before. But
and listen, I would agree with you. And as far as both of them are concerned, one thing that you can do with your son and your daughter equally is that if you guys sit down and watch a movie, or if you see I mean, listen, man, it's weird, Troy. When the red pill snapped for me, it's almost like my eyes were opened, and you see red pill truth everywhere. On TV, in commercials, interactions with people at the you see it everywhere. It's like you have X-ray vision. You see right through the bullshit. I think it is absolutely paramount for parents. Every time you see something that goes against red pill truth, you need to point it out to your kid. If you're watching a Disney fantasy movie, you need to make it clear to your kids, okay, this is just make-believe. That's not how it really happens. It could happen that way, but in the real world, it doesn't actually happen that way. Okay. Yeah, you need to point these things out. So if you see like I saw a commercial where a girl was in a football uniform that says, yeah, play like a girl. Let your kid know, listen, girls don't play football because they're not as strong and as fast as boys. That's just all there is to it. That's make-believe. You need to point that stuff out so that they know these things going in, because when they see this stuff, they commit this stuff to their fundamentals and they think that this is actual truth. So then when they hear guys like you and me, they're thinking, well, no, there's no way these guys could be right. I've been told this all my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, indeed. I think it's just sort of like pointing out these things as you go along, as you say, really, and just you know, being as honest as you can about how you see the world. I mean, in a way, that's surely the role of a parent, really, isn't it? To be not to freak out the kids, like I said, but to be honest and just to say this is how things actually are in my view, and my experience, and so this is how. You know, within that, this is how you can have a good life.
Troy, I appreciate you coming on with me today. Like I said, we're kicking off long-term relationship week. Guys, again, you guys can visit Troy's website, realtroyfrancis.com. That's REAL, troyfrancis.com. There you will find all of his works, all of his writings, all of his articles. You can find him on Return of Kings. I've linked his website, his Return of Kings column in the description. I've also actually linked the link to where his books are. The 7 Laws of Seduction. That's Troy's signature piece. I remember, Troy, we actually did a pretty when we did that project. I think it was back in 3 years ago, where the guy was working with did that introduction. Man, that was actually pretty cool. Unfortunately for the both of us, the guy turned out to be a crackpot, but we had fun along the way.
You live and learn.
Oh man, Troy, thanks for being on with us today, and good luck the rest of the way. You should definitely come on in the future.
Absolutely, great to speak to you.
You too, bud. Take care.
Bye, man. See you soon. Bye.